Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Joining us as he does every single week, it is Robbie Triano for some Tuesday takes. Could TCU win a playoff game against one of the big boys this year? The downswing of Oklahoma and Texas, two teams leading for the SEC in the Big 12 this year, not doing very well. We'll talk about that. And also, who is the most enjoyable player in the conference to watch this season? We get to all of that and more on today's show.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. We are brought to you today by LinkedIn, best place to post your jobs if you need to find a job. Also, LinkedIn, good spot for that. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at LOBig12. You guys can find me at Josh Neighbors _. You guys can find Robbie at the Triano Kid. Please subscribe to the channel. We are growing. Help us do so. So, Robbie, you're the first thing that you said to me when you sent your first take was about TCU and them winning a playoff game. That's where we're going to start. I thought about this and I contemplated this. Where do you come down? Could the TCU Horned Frogs win a playoff game, in your opinion?
100%. Like, I think if Georgia wasn't the team they are right now, I could honestly say TCU has proved that they could hang with the big boys and even compete for a national championship. I think when we talk about this league and how deep it is, and they have come through unscathed, yes, they've had some moments where they don't look like their powers. They're 10-0. They have won every game in this league. That's remarkable. And they have NFL players on both levels. You have a quarterback who has kind of come down to earth just a little bit, but at points in the season looked like a Heisman candidate. You have a running game with Kendre Miller who can punish any team in the country. You have skill players that can punish anyone, including Quinn Johnson, who could be a first-round talent. And then, something we don't talk about special teams-wise, they're like awesome. Like them in Kansas State in the league, I think they are spectacular. So if they go through this entire list of people and beat them, all of the teams in the Big 12 right now are technically able to be bowl eligible. They beat basically 10 almost bowl teams or 9 bowl teams, and they are that 10th team. Why can't they beat Michigan? Why can't they beat Ohio State? Why can't they beat the second SEC team? I think they have the talent, the coaching to do so. So I'm like, I think TCU can 100%, if they go and win out the rest of the season, 100% they could win a playoff game.
Yeah. So to me, it matters who it is and who is like really who are they playing and where are they playing to. I think this matters to me because number one, if they were to play Georgia today, I do not think they would win. I think would. Yeah, nobody right. That's kind of the big thing we're talking about right now. Nobody really is really beating Georgia right now. I'm skeptical they would beat Ohio State. I think out of the teams right now, Michigan is the one that I'm most confident they could get. I think what they would have to do, and we've seen this a lot from Michigan, is they've played with their food a lot in a bunch of games. And TCU has not been somebody they've done a lot of that too also. They play with their food a bunch. We know that they're slow starters. To beat Michigan, they would need to put their foot on the gas and basically put Michigan in a spot where it's going to be J.J. McCarthy and Blake Corums, I'm sure, but J.J. McCarthy is going to have to be the guy that wins a game for you, right? We saw it last year with Michigan. What a great job they did with Ohio State and did a good job with Iowa in the championship game. And then we waltz in there and, we've got the playoff game and they get crushed and they never had a chance to come back. There was no shot for them to come back against Georgia last year. And that to me is the big question. Now, here's the good news, Robbie, is that if TCU wins out, right, they're actually going to be in a spot where they would be the number 2 or number 3 seed. If they won out, they're probably the number 3 seed behind whoever wins the Big Ten. So the good news is you're going to be playing the Big Ten champion. The bad news is you'd think whoever that is probably playing their best football at that moment, right? And that's what concerns me. So could they? Sure. But like, I mean, I don't think they can beat Ohio State because Ohio State's basically TCU, right? Like they dilly-dally around. They got some explosive defensive players, and then things just kind of go kaboom for them, and they can start running, racking up points on you. So I love the idea. Obviously, I would love that idea. And think about, look, once again, like if TCU played the playoff game, they're most likely the 3 seed, right? And they're most likely playing the Big Ten champion, who's the 2 seed. So I'm just trying to play out a scenario in my mind, and I really feel like they'd have a difficult time doing it, especially Robbie, after what we watched this week on the offensive line for them, because that was a disaster for them up front. Now it got better as the game went along, but that was no bueno for TCU up front protecting Max Duggan. So I agree with you a lot of your points, but man, I hope it's Michigan for their sake if that is what it comes down to.
My issue with it is that, like, if you say, oh, TCU could win a national championship, everyone scoffs. Oh, they couldn't do that. If it's Ohio State, it's like, oh, they have a good chance. Like, I understand, like, Ohio State gets the 5 stars, they get the blue chip players, they get all that, and they have a history of success. I completely get it. But what TCU has done this year, if you say, oh, TCU can win a national championship, it's like, oh, whatever. Like, why is it so easy to just, like, be like, no? I don't understand. TCU has proved it. And if I look at Michigan's, like, who they played, non-conference, Colorado State, Hawaii, UConn, trash. Okay, then you play, I think, some of the weakest Big Ten opponents that you have. Maryland, Iowa, Indiana, Penn State. Okay, they're good. Michigan State, I'm a Michigan State fan. We suck. Rutgers, Nebraska, and then you face Illinois, who has now come back to earth with 2 straight losses, and then you have Ohio State. Like, if you put the resumes together, TCU wins. Like, that's where I'm just like, why are we so quick to be like, no, it's not real? Why they can't do this on the big stage? They're just proved they went through this gauntlet and had their bye after week 2. Like, there's no excuses. This team is healthy. They have battled. They have fought. Like, it's first-year head coach. They're proving they can hang.
I think you make a good point. Like, if they were to be ranked, right, and if we're using what we should be using, which is resumes, if you were to rank these teams right now off of what they have accomplished this year, and we were doing that, basically, it was a meritocracy, right? We're awarding you off of merit, off of what you have accomplished this season in your schedule. I would say I would agree with you 100%. I actually believe that TCU's 10-0 is much better than Michigan's 10-0. I think you're totally correct. Now, non-conference, Michigan, I mean, that Michigan non-conference is horrible. TCU's ends up being horrible, but at least they scheduled a Power 5 team in Colorado, and that was on the road too. So, I'm not saying it was a good win, but that's something that Michigan did not have. Michigan never goes anywhere on the road in non-conference. It feels like they might have, Notre Dame, whatever it was recently, but still it doesn't feel like they do. And then SMU, which they play every single year, Iron Skillet game. So, there was, that's a good G5 school. Actually, he's beaten TCU as of late. Right. And then you go through the conference schedule, think about all the ranked wins they have and all the ways and the variety of ways in which they have done it. I know it's, come from behind. Some games have been up top. The Oklahoma game was obviously a throttling. The defensive masterclass that we saw last week. And let's be honest, that was a 17-3 game. That game was 17-3 between Texas and
Next
TCU.
Duggan, I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, I'm just completely fumbling the rock. And good job by Texas taking it back. But I think if that's the conversation, yes. We're talking about what we've seen from this team's TCU in their wins has proven more metal than all of them combined. But we do know, when push comes to shove, sometimes these top level teams just can find a different gear because of the level of talent that is on their teams. And that is what's concerning to me is when that push does come to shove and Ohio State needs to start scoring, right? Michigan, their defense I know they're playing bad offenses. It's been fantastic this year, right? Could they get after Max Duggan the way Texas just did? Could TCU stop the run? Now, this is the other side of this. TCU just proved they can stop the run against an offensive line that's played really well this year in Texas's and stop one of the best running backs in the country. They really shut him out in a pretty significant way. So, yeah, I mean, could they do that to Blake Corum? Sure. Maybe for a period of time they could do that. I think definitely. But when I think about Ohio State and Georgia, those are the two, Robbie, where then I think, I don't know. Michigan? Yes. Yeah. I think they could beat Michigan. Yes. I think it'd be very challenging to do it. But I think they could win that game.
Yeah, and a fact that Mark Cohen, the AD, or not the AD, the
Oh,
SID
he is. He's the
at
assistant athletic director for something. They all have that title. But yes, the SID.
he shared a really good like stat, and he's like TCU has 5 wins over ranked opponents, which equals the total of the other undefeated teams. Georgia
Mhm.
only has 2 ranked wins. Ohio State has 2 ranked wins. Michigan has 1. Now I understand Oklahoma when they were ranked are not the same team, but they play Kansas at the peak of their powers at game day. They win. They beat Oklahoma State when we thought they were going to be the Big 12 title winner. They win
Fully
in
healthy
over.
too. Fully healthy Oklahoma State.
And then you play Kansas State. Yes, Adrian Martinez got hurt, but that team is still like that team was basically full strength. This is where I'm like, they've gone through the gauntlet. They've won. They don't have the style points. They don't have but like they have the talent too. That's where I'm like, I'm confused. Like they have NFL players at all levels. Like I don't know why it's so quick to write them off.
Yes, I think it's because of the way they're winning these games. Now, I would counter that with, and they're all relatively close. I would counter that by saying, like, yeah, but who else is playing this schedule? You know what I mean? And nobody else is playing. Like, Rutgers is not good. You mentioned that entire, like, Nebraska is horrible. I mean, Nebraska got dogged by Oklahoma. It was like one of the worst teams, one of the worst teams in the league, right? It was one of the worst teams
This
we
is where
had.
I'm struggling too, because if TCU wins every game 55-0, am I saying TCU is that good or the Big 12 is bad? That's where
Right.
I'm like, I understand, like, I'm kinda contradicting, like, there, but, like, I think this league is better, and I understand that, like, you may not have Michigan or Ohio State talent, but you're still doing the thing.
Yeah, and also, the one other part of this I would like mention in the playoff conversation is like, you know, I think TCU's record merits some conversation if they lose a game. Like if they were to lose to
100%.
Baylor this week by 1 or by like 2 points, and then they were able to go and win the Big 12 championship and avenge, well, not avenge a loss, but beat probably a Kansas State team for a second time. You look at that resume and you look at it and you say that's still really strong all the way through. And if I'm comparing that, and people have mentioned this too, I saw as Adam Rittenberg, our friend, mentioned this, like they're still giving Clemson a 30 some percent chance to make the college football playoff. What Clemson team has anybody watched this year where you're thinking, oh my God, this Clemson team, deserves to, and they're still going to be considered, Robbie. They're still going to be considered because guess what? Their name is Clemson. But TCU, if they lost this week, then 1, 2 more. I think Tennessee pushes them out because of Tennessee's loss to Georgia. I think a 1-loss Michigan or an Ohio State would push them out because they're Michigan and Ohio State. And then I think
That's where I wanna stop. Like, if TCU loses to Baylor but wins the Big 12 title, but Ohio State, who, let's say, loses to Michigan and doesn't even play in the Big 10 title game, makes it over them, then this whole playoff thing is a joke. Like,
right.
there that doesn't make any
Yeah, and
sense.
it's always been like that. But the problem that we're having is they've got such a good resume and they're playing so many good football teams. And then everybody's saying, well, their losses get devalued after they beat them. But it's like, look, all they can do is play everybody on their schedule. And they're good when they play them. All these teams are good when they play them. And they're beating them all when they're playing them. And it's just like, and I think you have to take the context of what the win means at the time. And if you look at the schedule and look at all of it, like I would say Ohio State win against Notre Dame is awesome. But you look at the rest of those two schedules together, they've got, Penn State's a pretty good one for both those teams, but it's been devalued just a little bit too. And it feels like TCU's got a bunch of those really strong quality, top 20 to top 25 wins. And the sad thing is all we keep doing, Robbie, is saying, well, they have to win out. They have to win out. They have to win out. If you put Oklahoma or Texas's logo next to TCU's resume, and if it was a 1-loss TCU, they'd get in because guess what, Robbie? We've seen a bunch of 1-loss Oklahoma teams get in, right? Several of them. We've seen several I think it was 2 or 3 of them, 2 1-loss, at least I think 2 1-loss OU teams have gotten in. And TCU's not getting that benefit at all. All we've talked about, Robbie, is they have to win out to get in.
Yeah, I believe this is correct, but TCU is the first undefeated when it comes to 10-0 Big 12 team since, I believe, 2011. I
Mm,
believe so basically, OU during that reign of college football playoff teams all had a loss, but they
right.
still made the playoffs because, oh, it's Oklahoma. I understand there's chaos around there, but it's like I don't get it if you I mean, you hit it on the head just because it's TCU. it seems like, oh, they lost. So we all thought that. All
Yes.
right. They suck.
And
Throw
it's
it
not
away.
like there's a ton of deserving teams pushing behind them. Tennessee, I'd give you, right? That's a really, really strong team. And you could definitely make an argument because their one loss ends up being to Georgia, right? So that's kind of what's there. But on the other side, like you'd be putting a TCU national, like let's just say it like this, right? It's Ohio State. Let's just say they win the Big Ten, right? Georgia wins the SEC. Tennessee is there. But if you got a 12-1 TCU, at 11-1 Michigan, a 12-1 Clemson as a conference champion, I really think that Clemson or Michigan would get in.
Yeah, TCU would get screwed in that situation.
But I think TCU is a team that should get in out of all of those teams, right? And also I guess you could chuck we'll see what happens to USC, but and LSU is the one that's sitting there, but I don't think LSU is going to beat Georgia. It doesn't really matter, right? So chuck them out. If LSU beats Georgia, then we're all screwed because it's going to be two SEC teams, and we could still have three, right? Good Lord. There's still a world, Robbie, where there's three SEC teams in the playoff. Georgia with one loss, LSU with two losses, and Tennessee at 11-1. Nightmare.
Every radio show that covers college football will be, we need expansion now. And
yes.
that, I think, every show would just say that. Be like,
yes.
Like this whole system is screwed. Expansion is coming. It's more like,
right.
Is it going to come in 2024 or 2026?
Right. All right. So let's talk about two teams that are leaving the league down bad.
Yes.
We just saw a Texas team get physically punished by TCU, at least on the defensive side of the ball. On defense, they were doing the punishing. On offense, they were getting punished. And we just saw Oklahoma lose a game to a backup quarterback on a team that just, that's going to have their coach get fired here. So go ahead and say what you'd like to about, and you nailed this with Oklahoma too, by the way. You said 5 or 6 wins this year. I think you said or 6 or 7. So you nailed that. So go take your victory lap on at least Oklahoma.
I'll start with Oklahoma here. I just don't understand Oklahoma fans. I understand fandom. You want to be positive and everything, but just because you have the logo doesn't mean you lose everything, have to install a new culture, everything like that. That is just all going to work. And I've said that before, but like shame on you, Oklahoma fans. Like you should have seen this coming. And the fact you're like, oh, I went through so many old messages and receipts I had from Oklahoma fans. And they were like, oh, but Dylan Gabriel is better than Caleb Williams. Is that really paying off for you? Is that paying off for you? And then you look defensively. Oh, we have the culture. We have Brent Venables. Oh, okay. And you look at the Oklahoma players and they are dejected. They are sad. And you are at this worst possible point. I know you were not going to the SEC next year or the year after that, but you were at the lowest point that you have been as a program when you should be having the highest momentum possible. And the rest of the league here is having this momentum as well. I understand, you changed the culture. Some people maybe loved what Lincoln Riley did, and then they stay or they go in the transfer portal. You're not bringing in all these players to just match this culture because everyone's in the transfer portal. They're all taking these players. I understand you're Oklahoma, but I just don't see how this is this easy fix next year. Oh, once we get our recruits, we'll be fine. No, they also have to develop as well. Oklahoma is down bad. Since I've been alive, this is the lowest I've seen them. And then for Texas, I'm just confused. I'm just confused. You have the talent now. You're supposed to be you're in year 2. I understand the culture takes a while, but you are ahead of Oklahoma and you have much better talent than them. And to see this team not succeed, is it a coaching issue? Is it just a Texas Longhorn issue? Is it I think both teams heading in the SEC right now are damn, we are not where we should be at this point of our transition. And it's really sad. And not sad for me. It's sad for them, not for me.
Right. I would say with Oklahoma, it's very different. OU and Texas, the situations are very different. I'll go with Texas first. I think, Robbie, here's my theory. It's a really complex one. I think winning's hard. I think learning how to win is pretty hard. And this is a group of players that is not used to winning at a super, super high level. There's some that are. Some of them have been around, but you kind of have a real mix, right? We talked about the exodus that we had last year. I think the good news for Texas is this. I think the good news for Texas is that if you continue on this path, you're getting guys that aren't okay with 5-7, right? And so now you're going to a bowl this year and you might be 7-5, 8-4, chance to win 8-9 games total, right? And then next year you got guys that aren't really cool with 7, 8, 9 wins, right? And that kind of, all right, we want to be on the higher side of that at least. We want to push to 9. And they should with the recruiting class they're going to get. And so I think we look at TCU and we see Sonny Dykes come in and we see what he did with his team. And I mean, look, they've won a lot of games. So they make winning look easy, but it's been hard. It's not always done. They're not always done it the easy way, right? And they're still winning this way. So I think people just believe it. They believe it's what you can do. Mel Tucker, right? Good example. Wow, that thing's humming. But we forget that there are Dave Arandas who had a great season in year number 2, right? And now year number 3, it's still hard. It's still really hard to win again. I think winning takes different forms for everybody. And I think with the recruiting that they have right now, the fact that they're better from last year, like that Kansas State game, they lose last year. The Iowa State game, they lose last year. They won. Now, they're not winning all of them. I agree. That's fair. But they're able to win some of these games they lost last year. And I know talent-wise, it's not where they should be. But if you look at team progression-wise, it is, right? If you look at just kind of a natural progression, it is. If you want to say, Josh, well, it's not about the talent they have, sure, throw that out then. But for me, if you're thinking about like a progression, like this does make sense. Now, are all the results there? No, they won't. No, but I think like winning is hard. And you're going to have a bunch of guys, the Kelvin Banks and the Cole Hudsons of the world and, all the other younger guys we're talking about with that team, Quinn Ewers, and if he's playing quarterback there next year, we'll see. But like all of those guys next year who come back are going to be like, all right, we're 7-5, 8-4. We need to be 8-4, 9-3, 10-2. I think they have to stack on stack to make that happen. Does it under Sark? I don't know, but like I would say that there is an argument for progress this year.
I agree and disagree with some things being said. Like I understand like you need to learn how to win, but like Sonny Dykes, TCU's under Gary Patterson, they didn't know how to win, and then they're coming here. And then you look at Kansas, they don't know how to win, and they're a both team. So like I disagree with that for a little bit, but I think
but there's Oklahoma and there's Michigan, and like it all takes different forms, it is different.
Texas and Oklahoma, I think that people like TCU and Kansas, the players there's a freedom of like there's not pressure. Like, oh, let's go. If you're at Texas or Oklahoma, you are expected to succeed every single time you play. And I think that is just like a pressure that like Sonny Dykes didn't have to deal with. Like the pressure that he had was like, oh, you have to be better than this coach, but the coach just was bad for the past couple of years. So like there's not a pressure on like those players there that I think at Texas and Oklahoma, it seems to just like plague them like so much. Like we have to be Texas. Okay, but what does that mean? If you've been trash for a decade, what exactly does Texas mean? And you weren't old enough to comprehend the Vince Young era. Like you may have saw it as a little kid, but you don't know what Texas is. So that's why when I hear these players say like, "Oh, we got to be Texas tough." Like what does that mean? Because we haven't seen that in like such a long time. So that's where I just think there's so much.
But it takes time. I think it takes time. I think it takes some time with that kind of stuff.
And I will say too, what has helped the Big 12 is the COVID eligibility, like an extra year, because these teams are a lot older than they should be. And I feel like teams like Oklahoma and Texas, like either their best players are leaving early or the players that are older but like want to play are going to a different school. Like we just saw like Oklahoma get ravished by the transfer portal, mostly Lincoln Riley. But like that happened to them. And at Texas, I that's where I'm like, I don't remember that many people leaving Texas. Like I don't remember like star players leaving Texas. You may be having your depth leave. Like the rest of the league is older, and Texas and Oklahoma they're younger and just like not as mature or experienced. So maybe when maybe in the SEC it'll all work out, but I just don't see like if you're not beating the teams that you're quote unquote supposed to be beating, and you're losing, I don't understand. People just want to be like, oh, the Big 12 sucks, but then these teams are just losing to them. So
Yeah, it's different. And then the Oklahoma part of it's much different too, right? That is the thing for Texas is they're close in a lot of these games, right? They're close. I thought last game it was just a big case of Quinn Ewers was nowhere near good enough and ready
can
to
we
play
talk about
against
him for a
teams.
second? Can we talk
Yeah, let's
about
do
Quinn?
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Quinn Ewers. I feel actually kind of bad for him because technically this would be his true freshman season.
Right.
He is playing at Texas. That is huge. That is a lot of pressure. But the thing is, we all expected him to be just fantastic because that's what the narrative is. Best high school recruit basically ever when it comes to his rankings and everything. And this narrative that's being built on how good is he every offseason? How good is Quinn Ewers really? And then we're seeing him play like a true freshman, and we're like, this guy just sucks. I understand, he has looked really bad, but I also feel bad for him because he is just not old at all, and he's
I don't
thrown
think
in.
he's that bad. I think he's going to be good.
He has the talent, but it's arm talent wise, I think we even go back to that Alabama game, holy crap, you looked exceptional.
Well, the thing is, he's not in a spot yet where he can win you a football game, right? I mean, it was the defense that won in the Kansas State game. It was the defense that won in the Iowa State game. And for me, it's you watch the end of the Oklahoma State game, you think, oh, okay. There's a long way to go.
Right.
And you've seen more of them recently try to have him manage games. But last week, TCU was going to make him beat them. And their coverage was awesome in the back end, but he missed. There were guys open. He missed some potential very big plays in that game. And my reaction is it's okay because he's so young. And that's the part of this too is think about Bijan Robinson's gone after this year, but they kind of got guys who are at a lot of different stages of the career, right? Yeah. I mean, Roshan's different stage, Bijan's different stage. Cole Hudson and Calvin Banks are kind of, more towards where he is. And the guys up front are actually a pretty veteran group they have up front for the most part.
Keelan Robinson too. I like
right. Keelan Robinson. Yeah. And he's still there. Yeah. And then the wide receivers, Worthy's his age. And then Jordan Whittington's a bit older though. So you got guys like that and JT Sanders. I mean, they kind of got guys who are all over the board. Right. So maybe some parts of their team are more ready to win than other parts of the team. I think that was evident last week, right? Their defense, I mean, talk about coming to play. You give up 2 chunk plays, but if you told me TCU scored 17 points against Texas, I think, Robbie, you and I both agree that Texas probably won the football game, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think you and I both be on that. So I think Texas is maybe more frustrating because the problems are identifiable. With Oklahoma, it's they just suck. They suck. Their defense sucks. We know, everybody knows they can run the football all over Texas. West Virginia last week played their backup quarterback because they knew that if they ran him, and he's not a good thrower, mind you, he was fine, but he's not a good thrower. They knew if they ran him, it was, they could win the game, and they did because they could run the quarterback so much. It's different. It's a different kind of stuff.
Yeah, the dynamic at Texas is strange because I feel like if you have a player like Bijan Robinson, you should be in win now mode, but they are playing the future card with Quinn Ewers. I think if they really I don't think Quinn Ewers gives you the best chance to win right now. I'm not saying, oh, put in the backup, but Hudson Card can do some things that he can, and also he's been there. He's poised. He knows how to, he doesn't necessarily know how to win the Big 12, but he's been there. And that's where I'm why not just play Hudson Card? You're clearly seeing this guy struggling. And I understand you want him to learn from these moments. So in a year or 2 years, he's going to be the best version of himself. But you have Bijan Robinson, and he's not a guarantee to be here anymore. That's where I'm you got to sacrifice. Hey, be on the bench for little. I want to win games. And that's where I don't know what dynamic they're playing. Are they trying to just get their young really good for the future? Or are they trying to win now? And I think they're trying.
It's gonna be interesting. I mean, people are gonna want Arch Manning to play next year, but
no.
Guys, it's gonna be the same problem you just had all over again, right? I mean, good Lord, God, Arch Manning's gonna light up. He's playing in what 2A. I know he does 7-on-7 stuff, so you see that kind of. But he's
I also had this too. So true freshman quarterbacks that have succeeded. I'm going to call Quinn Ewers a freshman because, that's what he is. Trevor Lawrence, unbelievable team he played on. He played on an unbelievable team. Jake Fromm, Georgia in 2017. They went to the national championship. Jalen Hurts, Alabama. Unbelievable talent, also plays for Alabama. JT Barrett, Ohio State. You play for Ohio State. Jameis Winston, Florida State. They all played for amazing teams. That's why they succeeded. Why were we just like, oh, you have to be amazing now? I just don't think his team set him up for success like that.
Yeah, I think the team's played really well. I think it was just like, their play calling late in these games has been so weird with disparaging how much they've run the football and how much they throw it and when they throw it and how they throw it. Like I thought the Kansas State game, like the touchdown passes they had were they were really good routes run by Worthy and they were good throws and it was all good and he managed the game more. And, he had a nice drive there towards the end of the Iowa State game, but a lot of it's Bijan Robinson. I don't know. It's weird. Like it's so hit or miss with them. And I think Quinn's got confidence in the script. I think Steve Sarkisian's got confidence in the script. And then once it goes off script, it feels like it always does. And that game was off script real fast. Cause as soon as TCU got that fourth down stop, I think he kind of knew what kind of game it was going to be. They were coming and they were saying, all right, let's make the kid beat us. And he couldn't do it. Let's talk about Deuce Vaughn here to wrap up this version of the show. We are really just taking him for granted right now. So much of the conversation on that team is about Will Howard, right? And Adrian Martinez. But I think the one thing that we keep forgetting, Robbie, this entire conversation is those guys, we can debate about letting them do what they do and what's more effective because the guy in the sidecar is the one he's just pencil him in for 100 and, a touchdown or, 80 on the ground, 40 in the air and 2 scores. Like that's really a part of this. I feel like we're not mentioning, and I'm just as guilty. We have taken Deuce Vaughn's season for granted this year.
He is my favorite player to watch. Like whenever I watch Kansas, the reason I love Kansas State so much is because of Deuce Vaughn. I don't think if he played for them, I would be this high on them or enjoy watching what they do every week. What he can do, like in the Baylor game, in some third and short situations, Will Howard, he scans across the field. It's like, all right, Deuce Vaughn, easy first down. Like when it comes to running the football, he goes up the middle. He's not afraid, and he's just small, and he's not afraid. He's physical. In the passing game, he opens up so many things. He is this exceptional blocker that I don't think he gets a lot of credit for. And the thing that he doesn't have compared to the rest of the league is touchdowns. Like Kendre Miller has 13 touchdowns rushing. Okay. Bijan Robinson has 12. Deuce Vaughn has 5. That's a decrease from that. But I think Deuce Vaughn is probably not more important. No, I think he is more important than those type of players right now. Like Deuce Vaughn is just an amazing watch. I want to cherish his time in the Big 12. I don't know if he's going to the NFL. If I was him or if I was any running back that good, I would. I don't know, if he came back to Kansas State, what the NIL money would look like, or if he really wants to win a Heisman or something, if that's a conversation. But he's just my favorite player to watch in the whole league. And I love him. He does so many things right.
Yeah, well, you and I talked about it a bit, the vulturing touchdowns, right? Adrian Martinez has 10 rushing touchdowns this year. So anytime you're near or in or around the goal line, it's smarter to use him. He's picked it up rushing, or receiving. He's got 3 consecutive games with a receiving touchdown right now going on. And also, we saw it last week. The guy has the ability to be a horse. He got 25 carries and then 8 catches, 33 touches. That's smart in a game where you had a quarterback go down. And we're all talking. Guess what we're talking about, Robbie? We're talking about Will Howard, aren't we, with that game? Well, yeah. You gave Deuce Vaughn 33 touches, and he was spectacular and had over 140 yards and I think how many I've got how many receiving yards he had last week. But guy goes for what, over 140 yards on however many touches. He was spectacular.
50 yards in a touchdown.
Right. So 150 yards on 33 touches. And the guy's a horse and he's a little dude and we just kind of just forget about him and we shouldn't. And I think it's because, he only has 5 touchdowns this year, which once again, rushing at least 8 total, not his fault, but he just eclipsed 1,000 yards again, another 1,000 yard season on the ground for Deuce Vaughn back to back. And I think it's really impressive. And I think he's going to the league. He should go to the league. You get a finite amount of touches on that, as a running back. Maybe I hope somebody makes it worth for him to stay at Kansas State. I'd love to see him for one more year, but
Right.
I doubt that. I mean, you only get so many, hits before you have to call it quits as a
Oh,
running
and
back.
he has taken so many this year, and that's why I love him too, because he'll just get up and go again. And
Yeah.
he's been doing this gauntlet of the year. He's been times where he's banged up, but then he's playing. He's playing the next game. He hasn't missed a game, right? That's right. He hasn't missed a game. He has
Yeah.
done the thing, and that's where I'm like I just love players like that so much that just do everything the right way, don't complain, get up and go again. We need to be hoisting those people up as you are awesome.
And 236 touches this year is what I have him at right now. One fumble. I mean, it's really impressive. And look, Will Howard might be the guy that puts him over the top, but Will Howard can only do that because of how good this guy is next to him. I think it's big. All right, Robbie, tell us about your college basketball podcast that you do, where people can find it so they can get their fix of all things Big 12 hoops right now.
So if you're listening to this on Tuesday, Kansas and Duke play tonight, which is a huge matchup. And then tomorrow on Wednesday, Texas will take on Gonzaga, future Big 12 team Gonzaga. Awesome time for Big 12 hoops if you want to dip your toe into it. At the Midwest Madness Podcasts, follow us at MW_Madness Big 12. I just love college basketball, and we're heading to that time of the year. Besides that, you can listen to Big 12 Radio with me and Josh.
Perfect. Robbie Triano, SiriusXM, and the Midwest Madness Podcast. Boom. Got it there. Make sure you guys follow us on Twitter at LOBig12. You guys can find me at JoshNeighbors_. Find the show wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Please subscribe. Till next time, as always, stay safe out there. Robbie, we'll talk to you next week.
See you, man.